Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I would like to call the District Advisory Building Committee meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, March 22, 2022, and we are meeting via Zoom, and I will start taking the roll. Councillor Mark Diane.
Present.
Chair Emily Figdor.
Here.
Councillor April Furnier. School Board Member Aro Russell Butter. DABC members, Member Sarah Thompson.
Here.
Matthew Winch.
Here.
Jessica Moreno.
Here.
Jay Norris.
Here.
Abigail Fuller.
Here.
Paul Stevens.
Paul let me know that he had a conflict and wasn't going to make it today.
Thank you, Superintendent. We also have district staff, CHA staff, and Herman staff. I think we have everybody here, so we will start out with the approval of the meeting minutes from February 17, 2022. Do I have a motion? Emily first, Jay second. Any questions or changes on the meeting minutes February 17, 2022? Seeing none. Please indicate whether you support approving the meeting minutes with a show of your hand. The minutes approved anonymously will all those who are present.
I'm abstaining. I wasn't here. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yep. Same here. I didn't raise my hand for that same reason.
Thank you, Matthew, for telling. Anybody else abstaining? The rest. Okay. If you have any questions, please use raise your hand feature in Zoom so that we all get the opportunity to speak. And with that said, I will turn over to Superintendent. Please take over.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. And I do want to point out that Board Member Russell Butter joined us a couple minutes late, so she is here. So we've got a pretty full agenda today. Ultimately, we're driving towards the outcome that we would like to see today, which is the DABC making a formal recommendation to the school board on how to address the delay claims and new costs associated with the permitting at both Longfellow and Presumpscot. We are still in negotiations with Reiki, with a contractor at Reiki. So we're not at a place where we can actually advance that particular piece. So we will deal with it. We will talk about what that means in terms of the overall strategy for the use of contingency funds from various sources, but we're not done with those negotiations as of yet. So that's what we're driving towards. We have a number of steps along the way that we want to just make sure that as a advisory committee, you understand how we got to this recommendation and sort of see the full picture of what it is that we're asking you to do. And so I want to just take a moment to thank our team, particularly the Harriman and CHA folks that have been doing all of the hard work of working through those delayed claims and new costs in preparation for today. So thank you to Lisa and Jeff and the team for all of your work in getting us here. Also to the co-chairs, Mr. Youssef and Councillor Dion for their work in helping to frame the sort of the agenda for today. So what we're going to be doing is, just as a funny aside, I think my second or third year, I had a very, very large budget increase that I proposed. And somebody told me that if I showed people pictures of puppies, that they would go along with me. So I tried that. It didn't work. But I think with this group, showing pictures of the actual construction is the nearest thing to puppies that I could think of. So we're going to start with pictures of the actual construction so that you can see the tremendous progress that is being made. And then we're going to dive right into, some of this is rehash or, sort of the updates on things that we've talked about before around the delay claims and new costs associated with it and the schedule impacts. And then we're going to get into the path forward conversation. So what it is that we're actually hoping to do around Longfellow and Presumpscot, as well as, what that means down the road when we are ready to move forward with Reiki, and then move to the action item on today's agenda, which is the recommendation to the board. So that's kind of where we are. Because I'm not at my office, I don't have two screens, so I don't know how funny you all thought the dog joke was, but I hope that you thought it was somewhat funny. And with that, I'm going to jump into, to hand it over, I think, to Lisa, right, to walk through the construction update.
Mark is going to pull up the slides here. I can talk to the puppy slides, which we were all smiling, Javier.
Thank you.
So I believe everyone can see the screen right now. Is that correct? Nods.
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Excellent. So Lisa, get to the puppy slides in a minute here. Just this is the formal list of the agenda. So item 2, construction update, and we'll move right into that. And then, as Javier discussed, it'll be project impacts, and then the path forward and the recommendation from this committee to the board. So, and CHA will tag team with Harriman on that conversation as well. So, Lisa, I will turn it over to you for the construction update.
All right. So we're going to start off with the Longfellow. You can see multiple pictures at the bottom of the screen and just kind of do a phase-by-phase update. So phase 2A, 3 of the 4 classrooms were complete and occupied over February break. Phase 2, lower level, drywall at top of wall and installation of blocking for toilet accessories. And then phase 2C, the elevator, we completed the underpinning of the existing foundation and working on the pit foundation and slab. The phase 2D, which is the 2-story addition out back, foundations are almost complete, and the mason is to begin the stair tower around, or has begun the stair tower, and steel erection is to follow that. Phase 3, the future nurse space, OTPT, single user toilet, and 3 resource classrooms. Approximately half of the abatement is completed and demolition has started. So there's various phases that work is going on, but that is a update of all the different developments since the last time we met. And in the pictures, I should explain that. The pictures on the bottom, the one on the left and the middle are classrooms. You're looking at the fit out of the classrooms. What's not pictured in these pictures yet, but is installed is the flooring. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the foundations going in for the addition.
Any questions on this construction progress before I move to the next one here? Okay. Great.
Seeing any. And then we're going to jump over to Reiki. So phase 1 construction progress remains on track to meet the April turnover date. The painting has started, ceiling grids are being installed, so soon we'll have a picture of what a classroom will look like with walls, doors, and a ceiling that is not the concrete waffle slab at Reiki. And the casework continues to be installed, and framing and sheathing of the addition is in progress. So the photos you see on the bottom left is a classroom. And keep in mind that the existing structure was all exposed concrete with that waffle slab. So where you see that metal grid essentially are the divisions between the acoustic ceiling panels. Quite a feat to get everything laid out in a tight space above there, but will be great when it's all done. And you're seeing the casework. You're seeing where the sink and the tall cabinets will go in the back, and then the student cubbies along the back wall as well. In the middle picture, you're seeing the, essentially that will be where the conference room is in the admin addition. And then on the right-hand side is from the drop-off area looking at essentially where the new front entrance to the school will be. Any questions on Reiki?
Any questions? Yeah, you can go ahead.
And then Presumpscot, actually has seen even more development since these photos have been put on the slides. The Phase 1B, the addition in the back. Foundation walls continue to be placed. Under slab plumbing continues to progress. Backfilling and grading slab areas where under slab plumbing is complete. Excavation for piers, pouring of the interior pier footings, insulation at foundation walls, backfilling, essentially everything that needs to happen for the foundations, the prep under the slab essentially has been complete. Joists and deck have arrived on site, and the grading of the soil at the perimeter of the building is in preparation for steel delivery. And actually the steel has been delivered since we have written this summary, and there's actually even more steel up on the site than what is shown in this picture. So a lot of great progress happening on that. And in the pictures, just to explain, oh, good. Jessica's letting us know the Presumpscot Facebook page has an amazing aerial photo from today. So we'll have to check that out. The pictures on the left-hand side, you're seeing those are foundations. And in the middle, you're seeing where the soil has been compacted and all the underground is done. And the right-hand side, you're starting to see steel going up in the background, and then you can see the gravel and different pipes coming up from the ground for the plumbing. So those were the puppy slides. I'll pass it back to Mark.
Excellent. Thank you. We hope that's, again, paints a picture of all the work that is going on. So that's the good news. So the next several slides are an update to the information that we've been sharing. Some of it is the same information. Some numbers have been updated slightly. At this point, we'll turn it over to our partners, CHA, who's been really working very, very concertedly on the effort to get these costs from the contractors, to vet the costs, and to really move forward with getting the agreement in place for the changes that were caused by the work that was required for the permit, and as well as the costs associated with the delay in getting the permits. So, Jeff?
All right, thank you, Mark. Starting with Longfellow, the initial claim from Blaine Casey was $707,000. We provided some initial response and feedback, and based upon that, it dropped to $630,000. We then provided additional comments and feedback based upon their revision, and it dropped to $580,000. At which point in time we called for an in-person meeting to meet with all the subs directly, as well as Blaine Casey, and negotiate all of their claims. And that meeting was 3 weeks ago, and we were able to negotiate with all the subs and Blaine Casey and drop the final figure down to $462,000 for their delay claim, which includes 4 months plus 1 month later in the summer for removal of some modulars and ancillary work. For Reiki, initial rough order of magnitudes came in around 900,000 to $1 million. We had a claim resubmitted in providing some level of backup and more information, but still greatly deficient. We then got a revision to 820, and then we asked to meet with the subs directly and Hardy Pond, which occurred last Friday. And as of about an hour and a half ago, that 820 is now down to 775. But as Javier had mentioned, we are still in the process of vetting the information, or rather negotiating with Hardy Pond. And we feel there's still a good amount of work to do in this regards. And with respect to Presumpscot, the initial delay claim was $121,000 plus the overhead and profit and fee upwards to 20%. And at the end of the day, we were able to deal with them in one fell swoop because they had provided the appropriate backup and everything, and we negotiated a delay claim down to $95,800. So the total where we stand today is 1.35 million.
Any questions before we move to the next slide?
I have a quick question. The 20% is out of what? Out of
The 20% is what is called overhead and profit and fee. And the general contractor has a right to charge a percentage for overhead and profit and fee of 20% of their direct cost, their costs that are incurred within their company. And then they also have a right on top of that to charge 10% on top of the subs and upwards to 20%. So we were able to negotiate with them no fee, overhead or profit or fee on their general conditions for the delay claim.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. I see Matthew has a question. Go ahead, Matthew, please.
Jeff, just real quick, what was the duration of each delay claim, Longfellow, Reiki, and Presumpscot, respectively?
Longfellow is 4 months of solid work, and then 1 month of ancillary type of summer work, which we felt didn't require a great amount of supervision. So really a solid 4 months for Longfellow. Reiki is also at 4 months, or otherwise 20 weeks and 6 days, but we're working off the 20 weeks for the number. And Presumpscot is 4 months and 11 days, but we're working off of 4 months.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Any other questions for Jeff before we go? See none. Go ahead, Jeff.
So the next item is some of the additional soft costs. Everything has been presented to date has been on the construction costs, but the contractors charge for their work, both the contractor and the cost of the subcontractors. The soft costs are the cost for other fees in the project, and right now, 2 soft costs that we're looking at are the additional project clerk, which is the clerk of the works, and so there's the eyes and ears of the project and writes reports every day on the construction progress. And their original contract was written for the duration of the construction of the projects in the original schedule. So now with the project schedule extending, we've looked at what the cost, and this is built from an hourly charge for that clerk to observe the construction for the extension of time. The next one, and I'll pause right after this for any questions, but the next one is the additional effort for CHA. Likewise, when they built their fee, built it on providing services for a period of time. And so with the extension of the project, they incur more time and costs for their assistance in performing their duties as the owner's project manager. And so that is a placeholder for that cost as well. So that right now, we think on the upside is right around 100,000, just over $100,000. Any questions before we move to the next slide? Okay. This slide is one that we've shared before. This is the latest of the new work. So that was the work associated with mostly with the permitting that was required through the city. And so Longfellow, the new work cost $46,000. That's come down slightly. And the Reiki started with initial cost of $225,000. A lot of that had to do with the area around the library on the second level and the enclosing of that. They had a revised claim of $251,000, and the current status is at $299,000. So that's gone up slightly from the original $225,000 as the material's been worked through with subcontractors, and so that's still, we don't have a final number for that yet. Presumpscot, right now there are two proposals for the work that right now total $193,000, and so but you'll do see a note that says Presumpscot PR10 contingency for electrical change order not yet captured. That we have a $30,000 holder for that. We know that there's some cost with the electrical contractor that hasn't fully been understood yet. I think we have a meeting set up for Thursday just to start working through that with Great Falls. So that's the sum total of the new work right now with the updates is $534,000. Emily?
Okay, Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. So just one thing I'm not clear on is if this new work cost summary includes potentially other changes that we've had to make to draw down the contingencies for each project.
That's a good question, Emily. This is just the work associated with the permitting. This does not include other works that the contingencies paid out for changes to the contract.
Okay, so the electrical change, the potential electrical change order that was related to the new work.
Correct.
Identified by the city in as part of the permitting process. Okay, thank you.
And or related, yeah, exactly. That's correct. And or related to that work is correct as part of the revised documents.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Any other questions? I think see none. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Thank you. So this is the backup for the information that the new work cost known. This is PR10. Again, this talks primarily about where the cost, and we've covered this in the past. There was some at one point, some items that were a credit to work that we took out of the contractor's scope of work, and so those are identified with a negative. And then there, the primary cost you can see here. There's a lot of work associated with the electrical changes, and as we've discussed in the past, those are really driven by the energy code change that the city of Portland enacted in the summer of last year. So that was the electrical change was $100,000, and then as Jeff spoke earlier, there are markups that the contractor applies to that. So the total right now for all of that was $142,000, and that was, again, this is a summary of each divisional item that contributed to it. And these are the items that have gone through carefully with the contractor and the subcontractors. CJ spent a lot of time, and Herman has looked at all these costs as well. As footnoted here, there is the additional $30,000 estimated for the electrical change order not yet captured. So I mentioned that on the previous slide.
Any questions? All right.
And so that was PR10, PR13. This is a backup for PR13. So that was the line shares in the plumbing and mechanical changes. And so you can see that was $31,000 of the PR13. And that was largely driven through some changes to add additional plumbing fixtures. That's why that's a big part of it. The toilet partitions and the plumbing and mechanical changes are a big component of that. And Jeff has kind of summarized the information on this slide already, but again, this is the delays, right, as the schedules have been reconstituted for the 3 projects. So we've got a 4-month, primarily a 4-month delay on Longfellow. We have a 4-month delay on Reiki and a 5-month delay on Presumpscot. So,
Mark, if we can just do a quick update live regarding Reiki, I think it's relevant because I think it's relevant. So with Reiki at the moment, we are at $612,000 for the delay claim for Hardy Pond. And for the new works, we're at $162,000. So I think we need to take that in consideration here. I know Reiki's not part of the conversation, but I just want everyone to know it's that the $299 that we have reflected as of now, an hour and a half ago, it's now $162, and a delay claim portion is $612.
Thank you, Jeff. Again, that's a lot of ongoing work to get the information from the contractor and review it. So.
Sorry, Jeff, I wasn't writing fast enough. Can you just repeat those numbers again?
Yeah, hold on. 2 different GC claim, right? So the numbers are $162,622 for the subcon. Oh wait, Laura's correcting me. Never mind. I'm wrong. Let's leave it the same. I'm sorry. The 162 is the sub portion, is the subcontractor's delay claim cost that we negotiated. Added with the Hardy Ponds delay claim is a total of 775. The new works at 299 remains at that 299. My apology. My confusion.
Again, that's still an ongoing, as Superintendent Bantana said at the beginning. We're still working through to the final numbers with the Reiki contractor. So the follow-up conversation is what funds are available to cover these unanticipated costs at the beginning of the projects. There's right now a remainder from the LICEF, from the LICEF total project budget of about $450,000. There are still some small items to be encumbered by that project budget. So right now, if we hold some funds off for those things, we look at a remainder of about $400,000 that was not spent from the LICEF budget. The next item is the remainder of the funds that we had after we apportioned the BFOF budgets to each school, and then there's an amount left over from that. Sometimes it would refer to as the surplus. So and we sort of adjusted that after that we had received all of the bids. So after we opened all the bids, we rebalanced what that was. And so that number is $581,000. That was the piece that's above all of the four individual school project budgets. That was part of the $64 million BFOF. So those two right there account for about $981,000. The other items that still are out there that we've talked about, but we haven't looked at carefully how we would potentially use funds that had been earmarked for the furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. That's the FFE, and so for essentially it's the furniture and technology purchases for the schools, and that's a budget for the three remaining schools of $2.2 million. And then the last item of unencumbered funds that haven't been spent or hadn't been at the time that figure, the last final figure was identified, as the contingencies that we have identified, the construction contingency, that 5% of the construction costs that we set aside to deal with changes that come up during construction. And as Emily Figdor mentioned early on, her question was, has there been work that's been paid for out of the contingencies, not the new work cost? And yes, there's these contingencies are paying for changes that come up during the course of the construction. So those are again, we've talked about, these are the pieces that are the buckets of funds that that right now we would look at, and the first two are easier because they don't have any impact to work. I'll pause for a minute and see Superintendent Botana has his hand up.
Just on that last point, I wanted to just see if we could get an order. I don't know if it's an order of magnitude, but, like on an ongoing basis, I sign off on a number of change orders that are, in essence, subtracting from that 1.23 million. So that might have been 1.4 million at an earlier stage. And, over the course of the past few months, as work has been, going on, there have been change orders that have gone through our approval process and ultimately got signed off on. So those numbers are decreasing as we go.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay.
So what this slide is looking at is if we right now look at the numbers that we have from Longfellow and Presumpscot, the new work costs and the delay costs, that sum is right below the $800,000 mark. So if you added those two figures up, you'd get $793,992. And so we're right below that $800,000 mark. If we took the first two unencumbered portions of budget that we identified, the $400,000 from LISEF and the $581, that was the surplus from the total BFOF, that right there is about 981. So that's just about 180,000 above what right now the known costs are for Longfellow and Presumpscot. So that 187, if we used the as we talked about, if we take that delta, the 187,000, if we use the 400,000, the 580, or a portion of the 581,000 to cover the Longfellow and Presumpscot claims, we still have 187,000 from those two line items for those available funds. That still leaves the FFE intact, and it still doesn't take any additional from the contingency funds for the three construction projects. So I don't know if that was confusing or not. I'll stop, and if there are questions on that, we can certainly answer.
Yes, go ahead, Hafib.
Yeah, and it's not a question, but just this is our recommendation today. This is what we will be asking you to make a formal recommendation to the board that they approve the use of these funds. Before we do that, though, we want to just paint the full picture of how do we envision this playing out, given that we still have those new costs and delay claims associated with Reiki. And so, clearly from what you've heard, it's going to be more than $187,000, which is all that's left in that combined pool from the LICEF remainder and the bid results. So, the next slide is going to sort of delve into the how we envision dealing with Reiki so that you have the full understanding of where we are before you actually move into the discussion and hopefully recommendation to the board. So I just wanted to frame that, but I know there could also be questions about this slide, so I don't want to, stop that, but I just wanted to give you understanding of what we're going to be doing next.
Any other questions? I see none. Yep, go ahead, Mike.
And so again, this is what the picture would look like after we were to settle the Presumpscot and Longfellow amounts. This is what the new picture, although again, this changes, as Jeff mentioned, seemingly by the hour, but it changes. And so right now we're in the effort to continue to work with the contractor of the Reiki project to understand both the delay costs that the contractor is asking for, as well as the new work costs. And so, those funds would likely look at, using up probably in order. We'd look at the remainder of the LICEF and the surplus, and look at FFE after those have been expended. And one of the things that we've been tracking is how much we spent for furnishings and equipment at LICEF. And you can see from the bullet point that we spent about half of the amount allocated for the LICEF project. And that primarily covered furniture in the new spaces that were created, the kindergarten wing, in the admin area, and in some of the other newer spaces that we've added furniture. So that's the thinking there, is that we would still be able to accomplish some of the purchase of furniture for the projects with the remainder of with the FFE. And so that's the thinking of where we would likely go. But that, again, will be a further conversation at the time when we settle what the final costs are for Reiki.
Can I just, before we go, I know that we have questions from board members Russell Better and Victor, but I just want to add something. I don't think that you necessarily covered this, and I just wanted to emphasize that what we envision, like with the current Reiki delay claim of 1.1 million, that would amount to a 42% reduction across the board in that FF&E, right? So I think that is what we want you to understand, that the maximum exposure, I guess, is that 42% given that number. And so, the second part of that bullet, which is the LICEF spent about half of their FF&E, this leaves us more than half of our FF&E, even if the delay claims were to total what they currently do, which again, the purpose of all of these negotiations is that those numbers actually are, lower in the end. But sort of the headline, if you will, is that there would be at least the equivalent amount, more than the equivalent amount that what was used in the LICEF project remaining in FF&E after we did this. And, again, we're just, we're proposing that it would be an across the board, 42% reduction in the FF&E, but we would obviously have to look at each of the projects, specifics, how much is left in contingency and things along those lines to be able to actually wind up with that final amount. But that's the way that we're proposing to move forward with this. And then can one of you guys quickly touch on that possible leftover funds from the Presumpscot contingency? Because I think that that was important for me to understand. And I think it's important for the committee to understand, the fact that we're on different schedules for the project. So, Presumpscot being done sooner and so on. So if you can just explain that, that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, so I can do that, but I don't know if Jeff or Lisa or Laura want to take a first stab at that.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in on that. So with Presumpscot having a much shorter construction schedule, we can have a better understanding as to where they are in regards to unforeseens during construction. So we'll have a clearer picture sooner on Presumpscot as to how much contingency is remaining versus where we are at in construction. And so we'll be able to tell if we will have the ability to borrow against the contingency at Presumpscot to essentially refund the FF&E or pay for some of these delays as well.
Okay, I think now we can take the question from Ms. Oros. Go ahead, Oros.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think maybe what Javier said is answering my question, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because it sounds like with that 42% reduction, it is going to, or with this plan, it looks like there will be equitable resources under with the FFE for all the projects. That's kind of what I was trying to understand. If Lyseth only used half, Mark, could you just give me a sense of what that amount was, if you have it?
Of what we spent at Lyseth. Yeah. I'm going to actually see if Emily or Lisa can bring up what we had.
You give me a couple minutes. I'll do that when you're going over the question.
But am I understanding that right, Mark? It sounds like yes, correct. That with this plan, it appears that we will be able to have, about, similar equitable amounts for the FFE for each of the buildings.
That's absolutely correct, Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea is that, in fact, right now, as Javier pointed out, we actually, if the worst case scenario of the 1.19 million were we would still have 58% of the FFE, which is above what we spent at Lyseth.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm sure, each project and what their needs are different, so I understand that too. But okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Emily, your second, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. I believe that the original FFE figure is based on just an overall percent of either the square footage of the project or the overall budget. Is that right?
As a percent of the construction cost, yeah. So, which is very closely aligned with the 8% of the total project. But yeah.
I might have kids just walking in, so bear with me, but I hear lots of footsteps. Did we then go in and do a finer grained analysis looking at building the FFE costs that we thought we might have for each project? And if so, where did that land? And then my last question with respect to this is, clearly in the last, since we've bought all the FFE for Lyseth, we've seen big increases in inflation. So would we expect the costs of all of these, different pieces of furniture and technology, et cetera, those prices to have increased as well? And how do we try to understand that, and whether this would leave a sufficient budget?
Yeah, I think all good questions, Emily. So we have, Herman has started to evaluate the costs for furniture. And so while it's not finalized yet, we are building it based on costs that we're seeing in the furniture market today. So they encompass, and certainly like everything, they've seen increases. They haven't seen the same increases that we've seen from a lot of construction materials. So that's the good news, is that it's not like steel costs in building material that have really skyrocketed. roofing costs or things like that. So, but there have been increases. We think that those are still within the range of what we've, will have appropriated for the FFE budgets for each of those. But there will be a prioritization exercise at a certain point when we get into that conversation about what are the available funds, and it's what we looked at that with LISEF in terms of really understanding where the greatest needs were, and there was an inventory of what the furniture was, and so there's certainly still a lot of effort left in understanding how best to use those funds, but I think we'll still be able to be as equitable as we certainly treated the LISEF project.
Great. And my last question is, I apologize for this, but I was really focused on FFE and I didn't fully understand the Presumpscot, the potential for leftover funds from the Presumpscot contingency. Can you explain that again and again? My apologies.
No problem. So essentially, Presumpscot will be done first. So we'll have a clear understanding as to how much is left from the contingency, and then we can use any of that surplus money to back fund the FF&E, because we don't have to buy all the furniture at once, or it can come at different times throughout the project.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much.
And I'm afraid of jinxing us in this, but I think what was compelling for me was to understand that, the major work that you would potentially run into contingencies at Presumpscot is behind us, right? The costs of some of the, construction materials, any increases along those lines, as well as, just the digging and laying foundation and things along those lines. So, in that respect, we're close to a place where we know that we've, we're past most of those contingencies. And maybe that was just my wishful thinking as I listened to you guys explain this.
We're past the new coming up out of the ground for a portion of the new construction. There's still some unknowns with renovations and connections to buildings and things like that. But again, we'll also much shorter duration of construction. So we'll have a much clearer picture sooner and be able to tap into that.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Superintendent, for explaining more. Matthew, you're next.
Yeah, I have a few questions. First one is just to make sure that the analysis that we've been looking at in these latter slides, you keep referring to the putting Reiki aside, but focusing on Presumpscot and Longfellow. But does that analysis include the $100,000 in soft costs?
Yeah, that does, to my understanding, that does not include the $100,000 in soft cost.
So so that should be in this breakdown somewhere. I would think it's money that's needs to be spent, so we shouldn't ignore it. The other question is, when are you bidding out the furniture?
Well, and part of that is understanding what we need absolutely when, because the first one, as Lisa's been pointing out, first one is, Presumpscot will be done as a project, but we're turning over rooms in Longfellow and Reiki now. And so what we're able to do is reuse the furniture that the classrooms had. And so as a strategy until we have a better sense of what the budget available for the furniture. And as we sort of said, that there's a level of prioritization that will occur in understanding how much will be appropriated for each of the schools. And so I think the issue is right now that still hasn't been finalized when we're going to go out to bid on the furniture.
Okay.
There are a couple different strategies too around that.
Okay. And the other thing I was going to bring up, it's along the lines of the contingency analysis. I'm just wondering, as a set of percentages, LISEF was, similar in its complexities as these other three schools, so it can be used as a decent backdrop for some analysis, where was the bulk of the contingency spent on LISA? And was it coming out of the ground or was it with the renovation? Because I know I'm hesitant to talk about reducing contingencies because if I recall, LISETH used all of its contingency or most of it, correct?
Yeah, there were several items I think that contributed, Matthew. That probably there's a fair amount of interior work that used up some of the contingency. There was also a portion, I think it's been mentioned prior to, that there was some of the effort to get the project underway. There were some unsuitable soils. There was a few other items, and so there were some costs expended on the outside of the project. But it was kind of in both places. I believe that we will encounter some of the unforeseen conditions as we get into the interior areas of Presumpscot. So I think I'm hopeful too that it's that we'll have a good amount left. But I think there's still a lot of the interior renovation and not knowing what we might find there.
Well, and I guess that's why I'm asking for the analysis of LISETH, because it sounds like you're describing LISETH as a worst case, is in the sense of some of the existing issues coming out of the ground, the soils and whatnot that you reflected on, and that not being the case at Presumpscot. You don't have as much building area and building addition at Longfellow or Reiki. So can you provide us an analysis of, was it 60% of the contingency was spent on interior existing renovation unknowns, or was it 25%? And if we had that information, the school, at least Presumpscot and Reiki, come from the same era as LISETH. Longfellow, obviously being a much older building, that's a different kettle of fish, but it could at least provide some insight as opposed to just, I don't want to say wishful thinking, but that's kind of what it feels like right now, saying, oh, we're out of the ground at Presumpscot and we won't have any issue. It's if 20% of the issues were interior renovations at LISETH for their existing conditions, then maybe that's, worth, putting some stock in. But right now I'm sort of leery to do that myself.
Fair enough. We can dig through it. It's going to take a little effort to go through the numbers just to break that out, but we can do an analysis to understand approximately how much that was inside versus outside.
Just to clarify, we're not proposing to pull from the Presumpscot contingency today. It is, I think it was mentioned, because when the project will be near completion, any funds that are left over can be reallocated and put back and applied against the decision that you make today by taking from FF&E. I think that's correct, right, Mark?
Correct.
Yeah, that's right. So
it is correct.
You think about this slide right here, some of this last line item will be remaining, and we'll know what that portion of the remainder from the Presumpscot project sooner than we will know from Longfellow and from Reiki. And so we'll have an understanding of, okay, how much of that is potentially available for to fund some of the delay costs.
And my question is, just to be clear, I want to make sure we know where we could be heading with LISETH as a model. It's hoping for positive numbers, but I want us to be looking at it with a clear head here, because we're essentially being asked to make decisions with money that we might not have. So that's why I'm trying to hopefully understand what the trends are suggesting better before we start making decisions sooner, as opposed to what we hope happens later.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Matthew, that we can also, all very valid points. I think the other thing to think about is, by the time Presumpscot is done, maybe not rely on it as a solution, but just a opportunity to fund additional FF&E with that contingency, because you'll still have time to order furniture for the other projects that won't be complete for a certain duration of time, or even order additional for Presumpscot.
Can I just, again, for my purpose for framing this, that, I want to be clear that, we're looking at our maximum exposure right now is the 1.19, or the 1.12 million that could potentially still be needed for Reiki. And if we didn't have any leftover in the Presumpscot contingency, we would need to reduce the FF&E budget by 42%, which would still leave us close to, 60%, which is more than what we wound up using in LICEF. And I think that that's the headline here. That's why it's the first bullet. And then the other piece is the possibility, and just because of the timing and so on, that there could be some additional money left in the Presumpscot contingency. And that's not to take away, I totally agree, Matthew, that we should look at that contingency analysis. I think that, both the LICEF example as well as where we currently stand on the contingencies for the other three projects, so that there's a full understanding of, what have been some of the contingencies that we've run into to date on, Longfellow, Presumpscot, and Reiki as well. So I think that for the next meeting, we will have that information, and that will be the time that we will be actually making, hopefully, a decision around how to fund the Reiki delay claims and new costs, in addition to, as you pointed out, the soft costs, which are not currently included in any of these totals.
Right. And my overall point is that at least if you have some relative data, it can at least tell us what a minimum exposure might be. I'm not thinking it's going to tell us what a maximum exposure would be, but at least it would tell us of that $1.238444 million. Well, 70% of it was on interior renovations at LICEF, so it might be wise to start there as an understanding point moving forward in any decisions. That's all.
Thank you, Matthew. Any other question? Jessica has just left us for parent-teacher conference. Any other questions? Yep, go ahead.
So the next slide again is what the discussion about this, the recommendation. So the recommendation would be to authorize the use of the full bid remainder, the 581, and the 212,943, which is the remainder of that of the LICEF surplus, to settle the delay claims for the new and pay for the new work for the Longfellow and Presumpscot projects.
And that's what, we'd like to, that's our recommendation, and what we'd like for the ABC to move and second in advance to the school board, or, in general, we would want to entertain any questions about this recommendation, then any discussion that you would have about your thinking on it before we move forward. But so I don't know, Chair Youssef, Chair Dion, if you want to entertain a motion for this at this point, or you want to wait and have some questions and discussions first before you move to a formal motion and second. And
Superintendent, I'm willing to make a motion that we forward this proposal to the board in order to facilitate discussion and questions. I'll seek a second.
I go ahead for a second.
So are there any questions at this point on the motion, which is what's in front of you right now?
I guess I'll just ask, what are we doing with 100,000 in soft costs for are we punting that to another day?
Yes, that's, I thought the same question. I hadn't, as we reviewed the agenda and the slides, I didn't, put two and two together to say like we needed to reflect that. So I think it is additional costs that we would need to consider, and I think that we should consider that alongside the Reiki addition, or the delay claims and new costs when we bring that to the next meeting.
I don't know, I guess I just prefer to deal with it now if we know it's not going to come down, unless you're going to negotiate further with CHA, which
I mean, I did not see that myself until yesterday. So I have those same questions, Matthew, and haven't really had a chance to do anything about those. But, I feel like that needs, some level of vetting on our end as well. So I would feel more comfortable waiting until we had those conversations.
I see one hand. Mark Diane, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't disagree with the conversation that's occurred between the superintendent and Matthew. I mean, it's the first I've heard of it as well, Matthew. And other than having a declaration that it's $100,000, I'd like staff to at least vet it so we're absolutely clear and we can incorporate it in another proposal at a future meeting. I just want clarity so I'm clear that this proposal is to settle delay costs or delay claim costs for Longfellow and Presumpscot. Is that the goal?
That's correct. Yes.
All right. I just want to be clear about that. I have no other questions. I think we have to take some progress on settling some of these claims.
Any other discussions and questions? Oh, I see. Emily, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just echo Chair Dion in saying that, it's good to see this progress and to see the delay claims and new work costs settled at 2 of the 3 schools. I admit that I remain frustrated that we are not further along with Reiki and understand some of the challenges we've had. And it sounds like we're making progress, but this is never a situation we want to be in, but I feel comfortable going forward using these 2 sources of funds to settle the additional work and delay at Presumpscot and Longfellow. So I will support this recommendation.
Thank you, Emily. Chair Diane, do you have a question or you have? Okay.
No, I'm trying to manage my software. I apologize.
Thank you so much. Any other questions and discussions before we go ahead and do formal recommendation? Okay. Seeing none, Superintendent, how do we go ahead with the process?
Given that this is a significant action, and that the DABC's role is to make a formal recommendation to the board, I think it would be helpful to have a formal roll call vote, so that we can actually reflect in the minutes for the school board the DABC's direction.
All right.
That would be my recommendation. You could do it by a show of hands. If we're going to do a show of hands, we would need to, at least from my vantage point, get away from the sharing the screen so that we would be able to look at everybody's hands go up. But I think it might be better if we just do a roll call.
Yes, I will go ahead with the roll call.
And I think Chair Dion's hand was up.
Chair Dion, I see your hand.
I think this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Yusuf. I think this is a significant vote, and it shouldn't be dispatched with a show of hands. It should be a record of who voted, and the roll call is most appropriate here.
Thank you so much. We will go with that.
Is it helpful
before
to have the actual recommendation up, or do you want me to stop sharing at this point?
Does anybody feel that they need to still be looking at the recommendation before, or as you make the vote? If so, if you could just raise your hand so that we know, and then we'll keep it up. If not, we'll just take it down since, I think everybody has the board packet as well, or the committee packet you can refer to. But so I don't see any hands. So there goes the screen. All right, we're all there.
All right, let's go ahead and vote to formally recommend to the full board. Chair Diane, one more time.
Yes.
Chair Emily Figdor,
Yes.
Aura Russell Butter,
Yes.
Member Sarah Thompson,
Yes.
Member Matthew Winch,
Yes.
Member Jay Norris,
Yes.
Abigail Fuller.
Yes.
We are missing Jessica Morena, and she excused us, and Paul Stephen also.
And Mr. Chair, you need to vote too.
Yes. I will go ahead and yes. That was passed anonymously. And yes, what is next?
It's great. Thank you very much for that. And we just have, I think you have to share again, Mark, real quick, just to talk about the next steps and next.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So 2 weeks from tonight is the board meeting to hear this committee's recommendation. And then looking forward to the month of April, we have our regularly scheduled DABC meeting for April 21st, which would be the third Thursday at 6. And then the week after that would be for the BLAC meeting on the 28th. So that's our current scheduled dates at this time. And that is where we are.
Thank you, Mark. Before we go ahead and adjourn, any other questions, last comments?
Just from my perspective, just want to thank the team for the work going into this, and thank the entire committee for your, diligent thinking about this and, being here. I know that we changed the date for a number of reasons, and I appreciate people's flexibility on that front as well.
Okay, thank you, Superintendent. I also see Chair Diane and Emily. I'm not sure who raised first.
I'll yield to Chair Figdor first.
Go ahead, Chair Figdor.
I had a confusion with the schedule, which I just resolved on my own. So I'm going to put down my hand. But then I do also just want to say, I think this was, there was a lot that went behind negotiating these numbers and then putting everything together for us to be able to make this recommendation tonight. So I do also just want to echo the superintendent's thanks to everyone who was involved in all of that work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair Figdor. Chair Diane, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'll echo Chair Figdor's comments about the work that was put in, but there are two things I'm leaving the meeting here tonight with that I just want to stress to make sure it gets done. One, that Matthew had to say regarding contingencies is going to be helpful in the future. So I'm not looking for a lot of busy work from my point of view, but I think a template that'll give us some sense of predictability about how those dollars could be burned, answering that contingency, whatever it might be, is helpful. Because I think parents pay attention to the FFE budget, because that beyond the school itself, the tangibles about the equipment in the classroom and the cubbies and the chairs and the tables, that means a lot to a parent. So I want to have some tool that'll help me better predict how we might dispense with those costs when we're talking about the FFE. And then the second task or ask would be better, and this would be for the co-chairs meeting first anyways, is some sense of a timeline of what we've been doing in terms of negotiating these delay claims with Reiki. It's the biggest cost driver in this class of expenses. And I think at some point, we're going to have to be publicly accountable how that played out and what efforts we've taken to try to contain the claims that were made. Because there are other steps in the process, and hopefully to the team that's working on that, we don't have to make it more formal than it already is. But if that day does come, I think that timetable will be helpful for us to all reflect on and assess the efforts that were put on by the staff in this meeting and outside of this meeting in advancing Reiki's interest to try to come in on budget. So the Reiki school piece is something I get asked about. So I just want us to be as prepared as possible in the future. So thank you for considering my thoughts. And thank you, Matthew, for bringing that up, because I think that could be a very practical tool for all of us in our decision-making in the future.
Thank you, Chair Diane. Member Sarah Thompson, please go ahead.
I just wanted to ask too, at the next meeting, can we have a breakout for the 63 million that was originally approved and down for each project and the bottom line as to where we are? If we can just see that all in the magnitude of the original amount that was approved and then broken out. Thank you.
And it was 64 million.
I took off a million, sorry. 64 million.
Thank you, Sarah Thompson. Any other question, comment? All right, we're about to end. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Matthew, second. Any questions? All in favor, please indicate, show your hand. All right, thank you. We adjourn 7:14. And as Mike mentioned, next meeting is going to be April 21 at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, the team, the good work, and yeah,
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair Youssef.
Thank you. Bye.